Hello, hello. Welcome once again to Seasonal Anime Reviews. We are now talking about the summer of 2024. This is fairly late. I want to say about like 4 weeks, sorry, after the season ended. Not like a horrible delay, but I've been busy. I just never had a chance to really work on this until now. But better late than never and all of that. Let's plunge ahead. We got 5 shows to talk about. First, of course, we'll go over stuff that I didn't watch but was, aware of, want to comment on, whatever. And some stuff that you can look forward to in next season's video, which will come out probably around, the start of January. The show Alia Sometimes Hides Her Feelings in Russian, I think did pretty well. It's an adaptation of a pretty popular rom com series. The premise is like she can speak Russian, and so she's much more honest in Russian about her feelings towards presumably the MC. She doesn't know that he can also speak Russian, I think, is the little twist there. So there's kind of like a gap moe sort of thing where she's acting one way but privately revealing that she's feeling another way, but everyone's aware of that too. I don't know. Yeah, sure. I'm sure it was pretty good. I think it was Doga Kobo did it, but we didn't get to it. Isekai Suicide Squad, I had a vague sense of curiosity about because Studio Wit was doing it. I've gone on long rants before about how I don't like this weird kind of Western cultural hegemony where acclaimed Japanese studios that frankly have much better things to do with their time are told to make like literal like Chat GPT give me the stupidest premise ever of Isekai Suicide Squad. But because there were, like a lot of talented people working on it, there is like an outside chance that it could have been good. I didn't find out. I don't particularly care to find out. It is what it is. There's other shows to watch. Giji Harem, or like Fake Harem, where it's like a kind of desk mates rom com where the girl imitates a whole bunch of other kind of common tropey archetypal characters, such that he has like a one woman harem is the idea here. Seems kind of funny. I don't know. It's hard to imagine that premise like sustaining a whole show, but that's what anime and manga is all about. Might check out the manga at some time. It sounds cute, but we didn't watch it. Senpai is an Otokonoko, another cross-dressing series, kind of interesting. Feels like we're at sort of a crossroads with these types of stories right now. Like, when will these just become like trans characters? More and more, they seem to be kind of taking cautious steps towards writing them as like trans characters instead of just cross-dressers. This series, I think, was supposed to have a reputation of, being pretty like emotionally considerate and pretty deep into the relationships and psychology and stuff. So maybe it kind of breached that topic. I think at the same time, it's like a very goofy, like mistaken identity rom com, which is like there's nothing wrong with that either. There's some series that follow that exact genre structure and twist or whatever that I really enjoy. Going all the way back to like 12th Night. But we watched the first episode of this. I honestly can't really remember the premise. It was just like very wacky. It involves like vampires becoming VTubers or something. I like the production style of it. It was very over the top, very crazy, but we didn't end up picking it up. Dungeon People, I was very curious about. It just looked cute. The premise sounded interesting in a way that made me feel like it would be full of just fun little ideas and not really be bogged down by an incessant need for pointless action scenes or pointless character drama, but instead just kind of like enjoy the premise, which I always like. We didn't end up watching it. And then later I saw something that was comparing the relative popularity of shows in the West and in Japan. And this show was the most more popular in Japan than in the West, if that makes sense. Which to me was like, oh, that's an indicator of quality. You know what show was more popular in the West than in Japan? The most more popular was the Rick and Morty anime. It was 52 times more popular in the West than in Japan. And that just kind of makes you think like whatever is on the opposite side of the scale of that might be like really good. So I'm still curious about this one. Ramen Akaneko. This is another one that I'll probably read the manga of, about cats running a ramen shop. Who doesn't love that? Unless you get the fur in the food. That's no good. But yeah, it sounded cute. It looked cute. The art style seemed kind of cool and extreme. I'd like to read the manga or something. Check it out. Dead Demons Destruction, the first kind of full-scale animated adaptation of Inio Asano's works, one of my favorite mangaka of all time. One of my favorite series by him. I think an absolute banger. We started watching this. We're, I think, mostly caught up, but it's like a super core. It's like 19 episodes, I want to say. So we're getting there. I'm like personally further behind too, but I've read the manga, so it kind of balances out. But then they are changing things from the manga. I think that's very bold and very correct, to experiment a little bit with things like scene ordering and when you introduce certain concepts and stuff. They went so far as to have like an episode 0 that was just plot points translated from way deeper into the series. I think to try to make the plot a little more comprehensible. I think in general most of these are to make the plot a little simpler to follow, which I don't know, like they may be going a little too far. I haven't watched enough to say, but I think that's like fine. I'm always kind of excited when adaptations change things and seem to try to attract new audiences or kind of highlight different stuff. But yeah, I'm very, very impressed with this overall. I love this manga. I think the adaptation's been great. I'm excited to watch the rest of it. And the Monogatari off-season and monster season did air in its entirety. We really did it. We got more Monogatari by Shaft. I was hopelessly behind on everything. I was prioritizing catching up with stuff that I was watching with Anime Club. So I've only seen like 3 episodes of this, which is, you know, embarrassing as a big-time Monogatari fan. I thought about, I should just like watch the rest of it before I make this video because it came out this season. I should include it with the season stuff. But nah, I mean, I've violated that rule before. We talked about like Heavenly Delusion a season late or whatever. I'm just gonna watch it now or sometime in the near future, hopefully when I have time. I don't see any sense in rushing it. I don't see any sense in trying to shove it in here to meet some deadline. We'll talk about it when we talk about it. The stuff I saw was fantastic. I love Monogatari. It's really back. I can't believe it. I never would have even dreamed for this day. So very, very excited to share my thoughts in another 4 months or whatever, another 3 months. Okay, let's get to the shows that I did watch, starting with Shoshimin, How to Become Ordinary, aka the Shoshimin series, aka something else that I think Shoshimin is short for. We watched this mainly because it was based on light novels by the guy who made Hyoka. And I'm a big, big fan of Hyoka. I read the manga, which is very slowly getting scanlated, and I watched the excellent KyoAni adaptation back in 2012. And I was like, yeah, I really like this guy's writing style. I really like this guy's characterization, his worldview. What's this other series? Let's check it out. And yeah, it's like Hyoka. It's maybe the second ever Hyoka-like. It's another brainchild by someone who thinks in a very unique, very particular way. We have a main character who's a guy has this knack for uncovering mysteries. His trusty partner in deduction is a girl who is curious about mysteries and instigates him into solving these. And these are very, very low-stake mysteries that they solve. They just kind of crop up in their day-to-day social lives, you know. Really, really low stakes. How did he make hot chocolate without dirtying more dishes? They go visit a friend. He comes out with 3 mugs of hot chocolate. They drink it up. Tasty. They go out into the kitchen. His sister is like, hey, I don't get this. If he made hot chocolate, shouldn't there be more dishes in the sink? And this launches into like a 15-minute, vast majority of the episode, speculation on how he pulled off this feat, which has a shockingly mundane answer, wouldn't you believe it? Or another complete episode that's spent on the newspaper club receives some pastries. They're informed later that there should have been a prank pastry that contained wasabi mixed in. Nobody can cop up to eating the one with wasabi. It seems unlikely that any of them did, given their extremely placid reactions as they ate it. So what's the deal? Where's the pastry with wasabi? This is how the series occupies its time. This is how the characters occupy their time. This is how the writer occupies himself in coming up with these things. Once the mystery is set up, they work through it with very calm, Socratic dialogue, a catechism of questions and speculation and investigation and answer, just step by step, taking each theory and figuring out what would prove or disprove it, and then taking those steps. It's very slow, very methodical, very peaceful, relaxing, serene. It's lovely. The solution is always in this really nice sweet spot between surmisable, between being something that you easily could have come up with without it being so out of the blue and out of the ordinary that you're like shocked. But you are a little surprised too, because they take you on such a journey, and yet the final steps, the final conclusions are always just a little unorthodox in a way that makes you smile and makes you realize that as much as you've been trying to pay attention and keep up, there may have been a couple details that are a little more crucial than you thought that you overlooked. It's very lovely. Very, very charming experience. I solved a couple of them early. I'm proud of myself. I solved the pastry one like super early. And then as the clues started piling up, beautiful feeling. And there are developments along the way. New information is added. There's little twists. Things that you don't expect or weren't given in the initial premise, but that's okay. It's nothing stupid. It's nothing ass-pully. It's nothing that makes you feel like previous clues were total red herrings or that you were being deliberately misled by any of the characters' actions or anything. It's nice, but to be honest, in this mode, I was enjoying it, but I really kind of thought of it as like discount Hyoka, you know? Instead of the god tier KyoAni and supernaturalistic production. Still some of their finest work in that supernaturalistic mode. With so much depth of character acting, so much depth of scene setting. Just such an amazing, rich, lived-in experience. Shoshimin has much more of a we have Shaft at home vibe. But that's like still good. I was still actually very impressed and very engaged by the production of this series. All of the kind of Shafty type things they were doing, non-literal depiction, instead of just showing the characters talking, you show kind of abstract imagery that reflects the characters' feelings, warping conversations to evocative settings. This is something that far too few animes do, but when the characters are talking, why have them talking in just the classroom they're sitting in? Why not warp them to any setting that may stir the emotions that you're meant to feel at that time? Symbolic representation, some really great shots of the characters kind of explaining their feelings, explaining their motives, and this being depicted in these sort of non-diegetic skits. So hallmark of the Monogatari series, of the Hidamari sketch series. Stuff that Shaft like really masters. I think they did a really admirable job replicating, attempting, we need more of this in anime. Anime is really falling into a very depressing realism trend that I really don't understand the root of. You'd think it was like, oh, because people want to post the hashtag Sakuga or whatever. They want to watch crazy solo leveling fight scenes. But then every time that somebody does something like unorthodox and does it like really well, it goes the hella viral, and everybody loves posting a clip of something crazy happening. Try it more. Try it more. It doesn't have to be like the most amazing, mind-blowing thing ever. Like, this wasn't hitting the very high bar of Shaft, because indeed it is a high bar. But it was still very interesting. It was a lot more interesting had they not than if they hadn't tried this stuff, right? Okay, so I also started thinking of it as like weird Hyoka. Because Hyoka, I think, is very like human. It is very normal in its own sense. The characters are quirky, but very grounded. They're charmingly quirky. I still love those characters deeply. Instead, we get our boy, who's like a super secret genius type, and has this really kind of like smarmy, vaguely edgy. Like, he's not edgy, but he just has this sort of like aloofness to him, and this whole idea of like, well, I'm kind of a mysteries genius, but I don't like to reveal my powers. Is just kind of found it a little annoying. And then his companion, who has the whispers all the time disease that so many anime characters get, who loves sweets, is obsessed with sweets, never stops talking about sweets. And I mean, I'm not criticizing that. Who can relate? But is just sort of like weird and vaguely unsettling, and has this sort of like creepy aura where she doesn't really show her feelings strongly. She doesn't speak loudly or clearly. She just kind of like is lurking around, whispering all the time, and has this very strange, unexplained relationship with our main guy. I just kind of found it annoying too, and it was like unclear to me. Am I supposed to find her like cute? Am I supposed to find her like endearing? Like, is this supposed to be like moe to me? Like, am I just so removed and dispassionate about anime on these like moe axes that I'm losing my sense of what is intended to be moe? And I was like, it's kind of weird. And their stated quest is to become ordinary. That's the premise of the show. That's like what the title of the show means. And it's like unclear what the hell becoming ordinary means, besides that it's like, oh well, we can't possibly solve this silly little mystery because that's not what ordinary people do. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, I guess that's not what ordinary people do. They don't spend their afternoon trying to like figure out where this girl's like handbook thing went. Sure, but like that's not like absurdly abnormal either. It's not like you guys were like, I don't know, vandals or doing something incredibly antisocial or like addicted to taking people's feet pics surreptitiously, or I don't know, going into the mall and like hiding bugs in the pockets of clothes in clothing stores. They don't really seem that abnormal. It's like very strange. Okay, like there's this like kind of weird intense aura that the show is deliberately really trying to pushing you to have an experience, and it just seemed like such a weird contrast when the actual meat and plot of the show is just these like very chill, very pleasant, low stakes mysteries. They'd solve one and then she'd go, "Don't you remember? We're supposed to be ordinary. Now let's go eat like 5 parfaits." And I was just like, what the hell is going on? Okay, but then things start getting a little less chill. Stakes start escalating slow and then very fast and ramping up in the last few episodes at an extremely bizarre and shocking rate. And this felt like very, very weird to me. Like, what was the point of this? Why, when you have the formula that you clearly want to work in, are you suddenly talking about bike theft and then fraud and identity theft, like kidnapping? And I'm not trying to spoil too much. You're going to be watching it and going, what the hell is she talking about? And then when it gets to that, even though you might think, oh, this is what she was talking about, you're going to be like way more confused than anything else. And then when they address these like much more serious problems, these like matters of kind of grave personal safety, it turns back into the exact same incremental Socratic exchange. Well, if your bike was stolen, then blah, 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 blah. The same back and forth. Like, it's so weird. But then, at the very, very end, right when I was like fascinated by this show, still pretty engaged by this show, but definitely kind of at my limit on the show in terms of like my patience, where I was like, I don't know what the hell they're doing, and I would prefer they didn't do like half the stuff they're doing. C'est la vie. Stuff starts converging. Stuff starts coming together. The last 2 episodes, man. Oh, man. So many things converge, not just in terms of like the mysteries they're solving, but like you finally understand what these characters are supposed to be and what like their pasts actually were and why it is that they have this like weird intensity around them. you finally see like why they're not ordinary, and like everything else kind of swirling around it. Extremely interesting. Extremely interesting. So many things got paid off. I got so curious about the rest of the series. I hope they do another season because I don't think the novels, or I don't even know if there is a manga. I don't think so, but I don't think the novels are translated or anything. So I gotta wait for more of the anime if it comes to see what the hell happens next. And it was still so weird. Like, even though finally it crystallized into something where I was like, that explains pretty much every choice that I thought was weird, the choices that I thought were normal then became weird, okay? Because if that's the story he's been trying to tell, why did he front load it with so many low stakes Hyoka core mysteries if this was actually meant to be like almost like a thriller? Like, how many people that would have been intensely interested in the stuff happening in the last few episodes got completely filtered because there was an entire episode spent trying to figure out how he didn't dirty like 4 cups and 3 spoons, and instead he only dirtied like 1 spoon and 3 cups or whatever, making hot choco. Like, it's so weird. It's so weird. This is something that I really respect mangaka for. Probably a lot of light novelists fall into this category as well. Just not really giving a fuck who ends up reading your series, foregrounding the strangest stuff, foregrounding the most niche and polarizing stuff, saying, if you don't like this, then hey, I don't care. You don't have to buy what I'm selling. And then putting stuff that probably would have mass appeal that a lot of people would be interested in way, way deeper and just kind of shrugging. It's amazing. I gotta applaud that. Alright, here we have a very Shaftian non-diegetic setting. They're having a conversation. This is a great episode where he eats one of the extra pastries that they were supposed to split. He eats the whole thing and then has to cover up the fact that he even bought an extra pastry. Very, very good. And symbolically in this situation, kind of the whole situation is kind of rushing past him. But it's also, very beautiful, this sort of symbolic, idyllic summer day, but maybe eventually he's drowning. Oh, it's good stuff. Anyways, I will give this an 8. I think it's quite good. Production quite good. Ended up being quite interesting. I applaud how weird it is, how almost hostile it feels at times. But I still feel like it could be like better executed too. Anyways, moving on. Makeine, too many losing heroines. It's true. It's 2024 and I'm watching a harem rom-com. I wouldn't have chosen it, but we chose it for Anime Club, and I'm down for the ride. But bit by bit, even though I was very, very skeptical at first, this started winning me over. First with the production. The production was phenomenal, lively, fluid, super expressive, with great running motifs for each character, for each setting. Nothing too experimental, nothing, Shaftian or crazy. Everything is sort of in the real world mode, aside from the very, very funny, super exaggerated faces. But it still managed to achieve a very good sense of, like, emotional bleed over, which is what I really, really appreciate in anime that often takes the form of diegetic breaking, where the background, the tone of the setting, the lighting, everything morphs and bends to the character's emotion. Here, they didn't rely on anything like that. Everything was still kind of set where it was set, but with more of like a filmic, live-action, directorial mode of just very nicely positioning the camera, deciding, yes, this should happen at twilight. Yes, this should happen on the stairwell. I was very, very impressed. I think that's in many ways harder to do. It's something I certainly praise in live action filmmaking a lot. So it was really cool to see this series, this of all series, like really put a lot of deliberate effort into making those things work. And then this wackiness, the lively, crazy, over-the-top character acting and stuff like that, really started making the comedy hit. There was stuff that I found funny. It was so superlative. Everything was so explosive in its mode. And it had, like, true comedic sequences, not just one-off jokes and gags and funny scenes. But a whole plot line that constitutes like the B plot of an episode is just like one accumulating, ever-growing comedic sequence. I like that. I like that. Characters have great, strong comedic personalities. They're all just big doofuses in various ways. You love to see it. Nobody tries to be too stoicy. Nobody tries to be too cool. Instead, everybody is quickly revealed to be just a big doofus. And finally, after all that goodwill got built up, after I was so engaged, so interested, so impressed, I actually started resonating emotionally. This is the part that genuinely surprised me. I knew that this series had a good reputation. We've been talking about how good the production was. That's kind of why we've decided to pick it up. But when we got like deeper into it and I started actually feeling for the characters, I started getting moved by sequences and caring about their arcs and feeling bad when they felt bad and stuff. I was like, wow, I did not expect to have this experience with a harem rom-com in 2024, but here we are. Yeah, like they just managed to make the characters that endearing, that root forable, and then exposing them to real suffering, you know? Not some like Urabuchi type world-ending despair, but some really relatable, down-to-earth suffering of unrequited crushes and having to see people you're into getting along with other people better. Not really having the words to express how you feel. Trying to get some sense of catharsis or closure, while at the same time feeling like all you want to do is persist the friendship as long and deep as possible. That's real shit. Like, I've gone through that in my life many times. It's very, very painful, and I think the series does a good job capturing that pain. And yeah, it's all supported by the production. The production is actually just so solid. Beyond just the crazy character Sakuga, beyond, you know, very consistently good action, movement, sequences, whatever. It's just the little things, the subtle things that really build up the mood. It wasn't like 10 out of 10 I cried. Nah. But it's like an 8 out of 10 I cared. Okay, but at the end of the day, this is all good and all. But I'm still watching a harem rom-com. And it still has all the trappings of the genre and feels truly very trapped by them. You know, I used to read a lot of harem rom-com. It was an era where I was just reading pretty much any manga that hit a certain threshold of popularity because I felt like I ought to. Which I still kind of feel to some extent, but I'm a lot better about it now. I think I just also didn't know about a lot of other manga that I would find a lot more interesting back then. And instead, yeah, I was just reading stuff that gets talked about on A. And, you know, I'm in normie hetero-monogamous romance, so now I read hetero-monogamous romance series. I read that kind of rom-com. The only harem rom-com I'm reading right now is one in Weekly Shonen Jump, Hima 10, and that's because I read everything in Weekly Shonen Jump. And it's fine. So far, it has remained on the edge of fine. So, and like, after reading maybe 50 plus, yeah, plus for sure, of these harem rom-coms, I can look back and feel strongly, positively about, like, about 5 of them. Maybe a little less than 5 of them. Maybe like 4.5 of them. A lot of them get like stupid at some point, but the first half is good or something like that. It's like all of the nice things in this series are subverted a little bit, are stripped of their potential a little bit, returned back down to the earth a little bit because of harem logic, because of the insinuous logic of this genre. I don't know why I'm moving the camera early. I'm just kind of flying around thinking about this nonsense. The love of the animation? Ah, well, let's anime fan service. There isn't a ton of this in the series. It's not the most fan servicey thing this season by far. But there's enough. There's enough that you can tell, hey, that's where a lot of the money's going. And like, far be it for me to be judgmental or say like, oh, points minus because it's too fan servicey. What kind of hypocrite would I be there? But it doesn't do much for me anymore either. Like, it doesn't entice me and make me go, ooh, I can't wait to see what other fan service there is. It just kind of feels like a waste of time. The comedy, yeah, well, there's some pretty funny parts. There's some funny sequences, but there's sure a lot of, uh-oh, I didn't know you're changing in here. Oh, you're like delirious from fever, so you started changing in front of me. A lot of girls changing, a lot of like caught in awkward situations. Again, comedy and fan service going hand in hand in a way that I don't want to feel like self-righteous about. I don't want to like say is bad categorically, but it is here definitely like worse than other stuff I know they could be doing, worse than other funnier things they've shown to me that they can do. And instead this is like the cheap route because people like to see boobies and butts and what have you. Emotional resonance, it's like I think the problems are real. The problems feel well articulated. At first it was a little bit frustrating because it's like they're always pining after these male characters that don't really get any development, and you're like, why? But by the time you kind of have this little arc and you really realize the depth of their feelings, it hits. Like I said, it hits. But the resolution to all of these arcs, and including some arcs that don't even tie into the central premise of rejected girls. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah, that's the premise, is that all of the girls in the harem were unrequited loves of some other guy. Anyways, in all these situations, then there's some situations outside of this too. There's a nice little plot line of this girl trying to inherit the title of president for the literature club, but she's extremely like shy and socially awkward. It's all some pretty good stuff, some pretty emotionally resonant stuff that actually feels like pretty well realized, realistic, psychologically accurate and cutting. Are always resolved by our guy. The MC steps up. He says something empathetic and understanding and cheers them up, or at least gets them moving forward. It's so centralized about his ability to do this, even though, you know, all of his characterization is that he's like a social outcast and loser. Somehow, again and again and again, these girls require no other support structure. The friendship they have with each other is secondary. They can't really reassure themselves. They have no kind of backbone of self-confidence or self-actualization. Instead, you know, the one girl's like a track star. And it's like, yeah, she goes and runs track, and there's a great ending to one episode where she's all depressed and then she just like sprints off, and you're like, yeah, that feels real. But she doesn't really like get over shit and start feeling better until she befriends our guy. And this is one of the big sins of harems. And by sins I just mean like things that make the plot worse. Things that make the plot less full and engaging and true to the characters and honoring the characters and just less interesting than were they different. And the biggest one, the number one sin, is over centralization of our guy in a way that diminishes any natural feeling of plot development or ongoing personality. Like these characters become less full-bodied actual people that go on living outside of their depictions on screen, and more just sort of a vehicle for our guy to make progress with them. They are, in the end, objectives. They are endings on the various routes of eroge, which of course all of this genre can trace its lineage back to. The series gets worse than most. This series is worse than most because of this whole unrequited love for some other guy, which gets twisted via nonsense and forced drama to dependency on our guy. Like, it's like almost a direct like middle finger to the characterization of these other people, that they pine endlessly for these other boys and then go through deep painful realizations of rejection and then have to strive to move on and move forward. And then it's like, hey, well, what's like the one thing happening in your life now? It's just this fucking dude. That's what it is. That's your future. Here he is. This is what your life revolves around now. Ugh. Oh, and he's got a little sister character. I don't think I put this in the slides. There's like a pining, doting little sister character. I thought we moved past that. I guess that falls under this category. The other sin, of course, is blatant wish fulfillment with no challenge whatsoever. You have a character that acts almost exactly like the viewer would probably act, has no real special charm or skills or articulation or intelligence, is kind of just falling into situations and then doing kind of the standard bare minimum. I don't even think this MC is like particularly bad or anything. I think he's got moments where he is interesting and fun and does funny things, but it's like so wish fulfilling. Oh man, imagine me, someone who has like no real social deep connections, who doesn't feel strong bonds to anyone, just happens upon three beautiful girls in their moments of emotional distress, and then manages to be a anchor and a support and you know, a therapist, and do so much for them and make them realize their self-worth. Man, I wish that could be me. And we can go back if you want. There's an old video I made. I think it's on this channel. It might have been on the previous channel. But it talks about the super insertion of harem rom-coms. And what I mean by that is that it's not just self-insertion. Because basically you see this guy and his awkwardness is sort of distilled into the fact that in the end he can't even imagine a future with any of these girls. He thinks he's just this like supporting role. He's just trying to help them get over their unrequited loves. But he doesn't realize that in this process, maybe they're starting to fall for him too. He doesn't realize, and it's like kind of addressed in the show, but overall, what you're supposed to think is, ooh, if that was me, if I was in that position, I'd be doing things differently. Yes, I would see the opportunities before me, these lovelorn maidens. I understand that I am the one that can truly bring them happiness, as I have been giving them so much support up until this point. Blah, 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 blah. It's just not a fun way to engage with series for me. It never really was, you know, it was like a lot of trans stuff and stuff, but it felt like this sort of principle was just getting in the way of harem series when I was like reading them so much in the past. And now it strikes me as like even more kind of like condescending and pathetic. Like, I've talked a lot about how anime should meet you where you are, and that I think a value of anime is that it's like non-judgmental, and that it can find people who are alienated by other messaging, alienated by other character depictions, and be like, well, here's something for you, here's something that's just for you. The normies are getting filtered from this. This is kind of like our own private conversation. Let's share what's really on our minds, what's really stressing us out. Let's look for something better together. But I don't think harem rom-coms do that. They do the same steps of meeting somebody where they are. They do the same kind of crawling down to your level, patting you on the back, and then saying, guess what? All of these girls have crushes on you. Isn't that great? This one's the big boobs one, and this one is the fast one, and this one is the eating a lot one. Which do you pick? I don't think that does anything for anybody. Anyways, okay, let's rate it. I'll give it a 7.5. Has some nice, stirringly composed shots like this. Lots of pretty impressive elements. But in the end, I just do not think I can really enjoy this genre anymore. It's just, it feels so asinine to me now. Alright, let's talk about the Elusive Samurai. Ugh. So, I've talked before about how we entered kind of a new era of big battle shonen adaptation. You know, the past, all the way up until relatively recently, was generally pretty done on the cheap. Mostly Toei was doing it. The feeling was, hey, this is already like a giga hit manga, So no matter what we put on the air, as long as it has that branding, people are going to watch it. And I'm not like super against the stuff that came out of this era. It's very nostalgic to me. Running all of these filler arcs so that they never caught up to the manga, but could still put out an episode a week for the entire year is blatantly just a money grubbing strategy, but it's produced, I think, again, a lot of stuff that's like very nostalgic now, a lot of just kind of charming garbage. And a lot of the cost saving techniques that they use are now, super iconic for anime. But then, we had quite a revolution. Bones did their adaptation of My Hero Academia. Ufotable started covering Demon Slayer. Mappa took JJK. The biggest stars of Battle Shonen in Weekly Shonen Jump weren't just getting a, hey, they'll watch it no matter what type treatment, but instead they finally realized, if we make our best-selling manga into a great anime that will attract all sorts of people that don't read manga, period, but want to watch a show, and we just do the best possible job we can, that's going to do even better than the manga in terms of merchandising, in terms of getting people into theaters to watch. With Demon Slayer, now they're just freaking airing episodes in the theater. People spend when they're caught up in anime fandom, and they realize that these properties that they were just kind of doing the default lowest effort thing were actually the potential financial pillars of the entire industry, which shouldn't have been a shock since they were the financial pillars of the manga industry. And to some extent, this sort of revolutionary tide did lift all ships, because these were like the biggest series in Jump, but instead now even mid-tier Battle Shonen adaptations, series that weren't so popular, were still getting some sauce. They were not kind of in the endless filler loop type paradigm where they were expected to run all year, but instead they would do a focused season that had new iconography, that had a great OP, that had top-tier voice work, that had some money thrown into the animation budget so they could really get some Sakuga going. They could get some fight scenes that would trend on Twitter. I guess the best example in my mind is Mashal. They had some really quirky little animation gags in there, this crazy hip-hop soundtrack, an OP that went really viral. They didn't pour millions and millions of dollars into it. They didn't try to make it into the next Demon Slayer. But they didn't have to. They aimed for kind of like a similar success to what they had in the magazine. And I think it went great. I think it probably expanded the fandom quite a bit. That OP did indeed go viral. But now I think we're heading into an even more exciting new era. And the Elusive Samurai, I think, is the true vanguard of this philosophy. There may be other good examples too. There's an adaptation of like the Yozakura family, but I don't really like that manga, so I didn't watch it. But maybe it's like really sauced up too. The Blue Box anime is running now, and it seems like quite good. It's just like nice, solid stuff. But the Elusive Samurai, the one that I watched, we can talk about as an example of this. So it was like a constant mid-carter in Jump. It's been running for 4 years, and has always stayed around middle of the pack in terms of popularity. So you'd think it would get roughly the same attention as like Ass Class did, which I think was also around the same ballpark of popularity, the same creator. It got a 2-core adaptation that I think by all accounts was fine, but nothing like mind-blowing. But no, Cloverworks actually went completely insane with this adaptation. And I think it reflects a new era of philosophy. From, like, let's try to capture what made the original a huge hit. Demon Slayer was already beloved for emotionally intense climaxes and crazy over-the-top fight scenes, so let's make an anime with emotional climaxes and really crazy over-the-top fight scenes, Now, instead, it's sort of like, well, we've got this property. It's not doing, like, super hot in Jump, but there's a potential there. There's the ingredients that if we truly made something amazing, it might capture just an entirely new audience from the manga. And that's, I think, what they did here. I think that's they swung for the fences. They didn't just say, let's try to get fans the same way as the manga did, because the manga doesn't have a gigantic army of fans as Demon Slayer and JJK did. Because the series, it does have a lot of uphill battles in gaining a big fan base in Jump. On the one hand, the art is great, the action is great, the characters are great, the feeling of arcs and escalation and growth is great. You know, I'm enjoying it. I enjoyed all those things when I was reading it, getting caught up with it. I'm enjoying week by week the feeling of ever-growing climaxes being built into it. It really feels like the historical landscape is changing. Great variety of action, especially in the early arcs that are covered by the anime. You know, there's hunting and the hunting game they play, the espionage arcs, the ninja character, to crazy prolonged sword fights. You know, some of the climactic scenes are just kind of a episode long sword fight. But on the other hand, the historical setting is very intimidating. There's so many names, so many dates, so many families at war. You know, they say history is a foreign country, and I think that phrase is very true when you look at something like this. Like, even just kind of the day-to-day lives of the characters, the chores and habits and modes of transit and everything they have to do is just different than it is now. And right now we're definitely in an era of shonen manga where the default is to just set it in present day, present time Tokyo. And even when it's a fantasy world, it's a fantasy world with a ton of IRL elements baked into it. So to set something in feudal era Japan, I think actually makes it probably the most foreign thing in Jump. You know, even One Piece has the Den Den Mushis. And then the series is littered, especially near the start, with these jokes where they take a look at something and they go, well, in the present day, this would come to be known as a tsundere character or whatever. Just making, like, what I think is meant to be a little connection between the historical era and now, and making a little, like, meta joke. And those are funny, but in the same way, they are still alienating, because it's just kind of one more level of, like, surreality in the series, that it's not even just kind of consistently in the past, but sometimes it goes out of its way to remind you of the strangeness of history and the strangeness of this connection between the past and now. If you want to hear more about this, I talked about this in great length in one of my, I think in the second Weekly Shonen Jump rankings video, or maybe the first, whatever one where I talk about Elusive Samurai a lot. I talk about this phenomenon a lot of the strangeness of the past and how they deliberately kind of play into that and play that up. And the tone, man, the tone in this series is drastically varied. Sometimes it's like extremely grim, gruesome, bloody depictions of historic massacres. Sometimes it's badass feats and fights, jumping and running and slashing and everything. Sometimes it's wonderment and adventure, setting off into new lands, taking your army over that far away hill. Sometimes it's like really goofy, bizarre comedy. Lots of like slapstick comedy and characters just acting inappropriately, and it's all over the map. It's truly all over the map. Having read a lot of battle shonens in my life, I think this is honestly one of the weirdest. And I don't just mean like raw weirdness, like there's certainly ones that have stranger premises or have stranger like superpower systems or stranger everything really. Like, look, earlier this year we had like Dear and Enemy, this very bizarre battle shonen. But it's like this strange mixture of like very super competent traditional appeal. We're gonna have arcs, we're gonna have battles, we're gonna have a cast of characters that grows up with you. It's gonna be set in historical Japan. We're gonna trace the path of a historical figure. That's all like kind of standard stuff. And it's all executed very solidly, very well. And then all of this like weird stuff splashed in, like this almost hostile barrier to kind of like concretely understanding what the oh, excuse me, what the kind of like point and emotional place the series is meant to put you in, it all just feels like why? It's all so strange. But Cloverworks' approach embraces all of this weirdness, and enhances it too. The tonal shifts feel less jarring and feel a lot more effective and kind of a general mix of emotions and roller coasters, when they're not just like you turn the page and you've gone from seeing like a dead body to the character getting harassed by the god priest Sua and him going whatever. Like that kind of jarring tonal shift becomes a lot less jarring with the additions of anime as a medium. Now you can change the color scheme. Now you can change the background music. Now you can change the kind of sound effects you're using. You can morph everything in much more totality than you can in manga. And I think it makes like the intent of everything that's happening a lot more clear, and you get kind of taken on this emotional roller coaster a lot more effectively. And the Sakuga, oh my god, the Sakuga. Holy crap, this series is cooking. Completely insane. So creative, so unique. Too many examples to count. Everybody loves the zoetrope scene where he's just running circles around the guy so fast that it creates like a zoetrope effect, which is fantastic. My personal favorites are whenever it kind of shifts into almost a sumai style, flowing kind of wood blocks, or not wood blocks, sorry, but like ink type painting, able to just shift entirely into like a different medium to depict poeticness or fleetness or despair. They really cooked. But at the same time, this isn't still like JJK budget. There's a lot of things that are very obviously time and cost and effort savers that feel very nostalgic, that feels like it draws on kind of the hallmarks of previous eras of shonen adaptations too. Stuff just like static speedline shots, a lot of like CG animation while they're riding into battle, things that kind of chill out the overwhelming feeling of Sakuga for a bit. That instead of your mind being blown by each and every shot, instead it's like a nice balance. When they start really heating up and actually cooking on the really climactic scenes, it's super engaging. But at the same time, they have no qualms having just like a goofy little sequence with very few frames of animation, just to kind of like bring you back into that mode, just to remind you that you're just having a good time watching anime. It's great. I think this is best exemplified by the ED. I love the ED so much. It's so classic. It really feels like it could have been out of a 90s show, like an old Takahashi show or something. Just all the characters dancing and DJing and everything. I don't know. It's very, very nice. I think they pulled this off just fantastically. This was far from my favorite thing in Jump, you know. It's not that I disliked it, but again, my tastes, I guess, align with the reading public, and I would put it around the halfway mark. But this adaptation really stepped it up. I was really impressed with a whole lot of stuff. I'll give it a 8.5. Okay. Next we have Season 2 of Oshi no Ko. And you might be looking at the runtime and being like, oh my god, I hope she doesn't talk about it as long as she did Season 1. But yeah, we're back at it. We're back. Yep. Well, we're watching it again. If you watched my Season 1 review, you'll remember that I was not a big fan. Or you'll remember that I talked about it for a long time and you skipped it. But if you actually watch that part, you'll realize I am not a fan of the first season. Basically, I thought the production was very impressive, but generally uninteresting, very by the book. The core premise was very stupid and unnecessary. The messaging was very hypocritical and did an actual disservice to the actual entertainment workers of Japan. And the climax of the reality show arc was an insulting disgrace to the memory of a tragic, real-life, real-person victim, which I did not appreciate. Season 2 is so much better! It fixes, almost like point by point, every one of these problems. They must have been listening. No, just kidding. But it is actually amazing to me just how much, if I had written down everything I found distasteful or uninteresting or straight up insulting about the first season, I feel like the second season has like specific things that you could point to for each of them and be like, no, they're doing it better now. Let's start with the production. Holy shit, dude. The production of this goes nuts. They start with what made season one work so well, which made season one such a hit. Just extremely lively, cinematically rich, emotional, diegetic action, performances, character moments, character drama, depictions of idol dancing, depictions of people acting, everything, you know, taken to this like super emotional extreme. I think this is what season one did very well, and they did even better in this one. I think they refined that style even further. I just think the scenes that this was applied to in season two are much more interesting and therefore more engaging, and therefore bring out more of this quality. Performances and music videos and character actings, and here we get some fight scenes, and oh man, it's all good. And then this is pretty new to season two. They didn't really use this trick very much in season one. But if you watch me talk about anime, you know I love this. When you break out of diegesis to let a character's mood, their thought, their imagination, whatever, spill freely into the depiction of the scene. And this can vary from just little gag shots showing somebody's thoughts to amazing mind-bending psychedelic sequences that kind of just summarize an entire character's arc. Basically, like primo mode Dogakobo doing their absolute best work in many capacities, combined with Shaft's stylistic choices and the non-diegetic stuff. You know, it's not better than the best of Shaft, but it's great. Almost just constantly interesting. Almost every scene having some little twist peppered in to make it more visually interesting, more engaging, more revealing of the characters. And then, man, some climactic scenes, like I said before, break into this like totally psychedelic mode, really breaking free of any sort of reality depiction, instead just like bursting us into the psyche of a character, depicting in abstraction and symbolism and metaphor the entire course of their life. I had never seen this sort of technique done outside of maybe like very experimental stuff like Mind Game or Kaiba or something. I was really, really impressed. Like the ending of episode 6, this is the main example I'm thinking of. Like I'm still in awe. Like I rewatched it making these slides. It's not very long. It's in the end not very like consequential either. It's all about like a very semi-minor side character that I don't know could possibly have much relevance to the overall plot, but wow. I think especially because of that, the amount of love and effort they put into this little sequence just shows they were thinking on another level of the production here. They were thinking in terms of an artistry that I think the first season was totally lacking. The production is just sublime. Great stuff. Okay, I'm gonna close the blinds. It's like right in my eye. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, so what is the season actually about? Well, it starts with a major arc where they're producing a 2.5D play adaptation of a shonen manga. I think this is a great concept. These 2.5D plays are really big in real life, so it's certainly relevant. It's kind of like an exciting area of the Japanese entertainment sector to see behind the scenes on, and one that I'm sure a lot of otaku fans can relate to. They do a great job showing off how they work, all the special effects, all the choreography, and to see all these behind the scenes sequences of them rigging up different fly in and slash and jump back and everything. The story itself gets like a good amount of focus, like the story that is being depicted in this 2.5D play. I'm really glad that they didn't just go full parody mode. It certainly feels like influenced by Demon Slayer more than anything else. And there's certainly kind of some like Easter eggy nods to existing Battle Shonen. But instead of taking the easy route out and calling it like Demon Killer and just making a bunch of jokes based on that, instead they challenged themselves to come up with a original shonen story for this idea, so that they can really explore the themes and characters and structure of that story in the context of staging it. And it actually works as a let's look behind the scenes where things are grittier mode. Much, much more than I think any of the things they did in season one were. I think probably mostly because this one is actually like very related to the mangaka. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are doing a 2.5D play of this arc in Oshi no Ko, which is like the most meta thing ever. But I'm pretty sure they had also done 2.5D plays of Kagura-sama in the past. So the fact that this is mostly around the mangaka trying to figure out how to bring their vision to the stage and kind of negotiating against the screenwriter, just the logistical nightmares of trying to marry these two desires, stuff that's untranslatable to stage, stuff that has to be compressed or cut, trying to like work that out. You know, the all-nighters, working on the manga, having to do this in parallel, all the conflicting stakeholders, all the skewed perspectives. That was good. They didn't try to, like, patronize you. They didn't try to just come up with some easy example that makes everyone happy. The progress they make is hard fought. They certainly make it look tough, but it's not exaggeratedly, absurdly like torture and we trying to fucking kill themselves. It feels truly empathetic. It's not trying to just sort of say, oh, we're taking a behind the scenes gritty look. It's not all glitz and glamour. And then end up repeating the rhetoric of idol production companies and going, in the end, they had a good time. Here you get to see exactly what good time they had, and it's mixed. It's not a black and white thing. There's many gray areas of compromise and disappointment, and then ultimate fulfillment. You know, I think it does a much better job trying to tap into what actually does appeal about people working in this industry, what actually appeals to them, instead of just sort of like platitudes. So much, much better. I think working with what you know is a good adage here. The feeling of closeness and intimacy, I think, was very well expressed by having a story that you can tell the mangaka of Oshi no Ko probably went through. Yeah, nothing sensationalized, no magic resolutions, no unnecessary shock value. They work hard, and it's tough, and there's a lot of unfortunate externalities, but they do their best, and you're proud of them. The weight, all of the gravity of the series, in this arc, all of the gravity is put on the success of the production itself. They just want to put on a great play. They have conflicting ideas of maybe what that great play is. They all want to give great performances. There's no feeling whatsoever that like anyone's life is at stake. That horrible, horrible things will happen to somebody if something goes wrong. It's so much more engaging to me when you ground it in the terms of the thing that they're actually like working on and doing, and not just sort of being like, and also a million anonymous internet commenters are threatening her life. Like I don't want to just complain about season one, but like this is just so much better. I wish it was even more expansive, you know? They do a little bit showing like the set design and the rigging of the special effects and stuff. A lot of space given to like the rehearsals and the run up to the play, which is all very cool. I just wish there was even more, you know? Like, why not have a little arc about the set designer trying to capture the setting and coming into conflict with the mangaka and stuff of exactly what did you envision this background to look like if it was brought to life. So the play is a vehicle of self-discovery for our cast. Major characters like Aqua, Kane, and Kana. Minor characters that make a comeback, like Melt, who was in one of the arcs in season 1, and the mangaka that wrote the manga that was being adapted in that arc. Some new ones too, the mangaka of the stage play, the screenwriter, etc. They all have nice little arcs. They all have a moment where their very personal challenges conflate with the challenges of putting on the play, and thereby they must confront them all at once in a pretty well justified story moment. This is just good, solid writing. It really worked for me. I think they really fleshed these guys out. A character even like Melt that felt like such just like a role fitter, a jobber, if you will, who seemed to have completely exhausted his potential as a character in that arc, comes back in a way that's like very interesting and is actually kind of like playing off your expectations for him and gets fleshed out and challenged and developed in a way that I found, yeah, like quite captivating. For most of these characters, these breakthroughs are based in acting itself, that it all kind of builds up to the moment where they are debuting the play and they're out on stage and they're doing their performances. Insecurity about their ability in acting, you know, this is one of the major crises that they're facing. Maybe there's a specific thing they can't do. Aqua can't let his emotions out on stage. Kana can't thrust herself into the spotlight. She can only support, etc., etc. This is kind of the tension, is will they be able to overcome these barriers? And I think this is pretty good, you know. I've liked this in other stories about acting, stories about performance, making through that final big barrier, kind of having all of these climaxes hit at once as everyone steps on stage together. And then basically kind of what happens is this, combined with the battle shonen setting of the play, leads to what are essentially acting battles, okay? It's a battle shonen now. In and itself has become a battle shonen, and the battle is plays. Where their characters are fighting in the play, and then they're going, this guy's acting is so much better than mine. I can't keep up with his acting. But let me have a little like moment of internal revelation. I get it now. I understand who I am as a person. God, no, I'm acting better. And then like coincidentally, then their character starts winning in the play. And yeah, this plays out like quite a few times. The characters they're playing fight, and then they have like this sort of internal battle where they're like, I can be as good an actor as them, and then their character like gets the upper hand in the play's fight. And it's like, okay, this is fine. I think it does a good job having like a cohesive emotional climax to this whole little arc for the character. It's like very well written and executed on those terms. But at the same time, it's like, that's not how like acting works. Like it's just very strange to like envision this feeling of like, unless I start acting better. I mean, it like kind of makes sense. You can say, well, unless I'm supposed to win this fight, like in the story, I win this fight. So unless I start acting better, it's gonna come across as like really lame when he gets defeated because he was like acting better than me. It like kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it's like not, not really. And it's just like so unimaginably convenient that the whole play is like set up that like every time you have a revelation, it turns out that you're fighting against, it's very well casted, I guess, that the character that embodies your insecurities is like the character, or the actor that embodies your insecurities is playing the character that you're meant to fight and beat in the moment where you're having an epiphany that allows you to be a better actor and overcome those insecurities. Very, very convenient. But it's fun. And the fight scenes are sweet. And like I said, the revelations really hit home and are well executed, and characters are well developed. It's fine. I don't know why I put "so I live." That doesn't seem right. I don't know what the hell I meant to put here, but "so I live" is very ominous. But yeah, it's fine. Where it gets weird though, and where I really had a hard time taking it seriously, is when this gets conflated with like actual acting. Okay? Cuz like all of this rhetoric that we hear about the actors and their performances and this kind of like hierarchy of skilled actors and what they're able to achieve that other people can't. These lines, his acting is so emotional, but she won't let her real acting be shown. I'm getting overwhelmed by his acting. So, this is a true actor. Many, many, many lines such as this. And then, what is the acting they're doing? It's just going, "Ah!" You think I would let the demon live? Oh my god. A virtuoso performance. How am I gonna measure up to that? I'm gonna get overwhelmed on the stage. But this is always how it's been, hasn't it? I've always relegated myself to the back row when I should be in the spotlight. I can act just as well as him. Yes, I've had an inspiration. I've had an epiphany. Now I will act too. And the audience goes, I didn't know he had it in him to scream and do 15 wire flips and scream again and then shout, as a demon do I not bleed red. It's like, just scream louder. It's like, I mean, I love Battle Shonen, right? I respond emotionally to Battle Shonen. One Piece has made me cry like 27 times. But like, come on. Like, it's too much dissonance. Like, I'm sure I would love these 2.5D plays. I love a lot of Battle Shonen. I think I would have a hoot and a holler watching these things. There's probably going to be moments that make me emotional too. And some character dies or something. I don't know. Got my blood boiling at other times. I don't know. Like, it's all good. But it's like, just something about like, I don't understand the depth of his talent that he's able to act like this. I guess I'm just saying, I don't think the acting is the hard part. I don't think the acting is like I sound really dismissive. I sound like an asshole. But then it really is just like screaming and doing stunts. I just couldn't, like, almost every episode there's at least one line like this where they're just in awe of the hard work and talent on display in someone's performance. And then it cuts to their performance and they're literally just like screaming. I don't get it. Like I think a good point of contrast is Drive My Car, the Ryosuke Hamaguchi movie. I love Drive My Car. It also focuses very much on staging a play and rehearsals and casting and directorial intent and putting everything together and blah blah blah. Very, very similar structurally, and somewhat similar rhetorically, in that sometimes they talk about what makes a good actor, and wow, that scene really felt like it came alive, and wow, I was really moved by that scene, or like, you know, the same kind of idea that there's this sort of powerful quality of acting that everyone is pursuing. But they're doing Chekhov. they're performing Chekhov, and it's some of the most like beautiful, heart-wrenching dialogue you've heard in your entire life. But the way they talk about it is the exact same. So I just kept like picturing like Hamaguchi, the director, watching the going, yes, when you perform Tokyo Demon, it takes a lot out of you. The play is showing you what you can't say to yourself. I don't know. Okay. Anyways, alright, so they do this whole arc. I quite liked it. It's a little silly. Stuff that I couldn't take seriously, but I tried my best to take it seriously, and overall, I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of really great stuff. Overall, inoffensive. And that's the highest praise I can give this series. They didn't have anything that felt like it was spitting on anyone's face or, like, inoffensive. Totally inoffensive. Great stuff. What's next? After that, we get a little arc where the premise of the series comes back in a big, big way. I always thought the reincarnation aspect of the series was the stupidest and most unnecessary part. It barely came up at all the way up until this point. I genuinely kind of felt like they'd forgotten about it at times. I certainly tried to forget about it because, again, I also think it's just very stupid. I don't know if waiting this long to do anything with it make me feel like more or less like it's stupid and unnecessary, because clearly they didn't need to do it until now. And even you could do this like almost exact same arc with like some minor variations and still have all the emotional plot points and stuff. But the way it did come back, I'll admit, there's some kind of spicy stuff. Some stuff that definitely ran a shiver down my spine, you know? I think the series does a really good job at pulling off like a creepy atmosphere. The feeling of Aqua and Akane going into these situations while having totally different perspectives on it, I think was emphasized really, really well. You were able to kind of put yourself in Akane's shoes and feel just so sort of lost and overwhelmed, but then kind of switching gears back into Aqua's more analytic mind. And then, of course, the things that they see that are inexplicable to both of them. The idea that he eventually ends up seeing his own skeleton, that was like a gut punch for me. I wouldn't have expected that it would be, but something about that concept, like, just, I don't know, like, it actually, like, worked with this idea of reincarnating after you die. But then your old life just suddenly inexplicably ended. Your old corpse is out there. Your house sits empty and abandoned. Like, drilling into these things, like really emphasizing them on an emotional way. For the first time, I was like, oh, okay. Like, sorry. For the second time, I was like, oh, okay. They're actually, like, doing something with this. There's actually, like, a reason for doing this that's not just, like, otaku bait, because otaku love resurrection stories. They're actually, like, thinking about what sort of story can you tell using this uniquely. The first gut punch was when he sees Ruby dancing when they're kids, and he thinks about when she was, like, a cancer-ridden child. That to me was still the high watermark. That to me was like, when I saw it, I was like, that's a very well done scene. I actually feel pretty emotional about that scene. Maybe the whole point of this resurrection thing was just because he had that image in mind of a sick girl who loved idols and longed to dance about like them. And then having this a catharsis of seeing her dance. I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's like the only reason they did any of this. And I was like, all right. But yeah. Now kind of running it back in like a creepy, horrific way. There's some sauce to it. I'm a little curious. Bit by bit, they are justifying this ridiculous, unnecessary premise. Bit by bit, they are. At the same time, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm gonna say very cautiously optimistic. The series has chronic bad idea disease where they really cannot help themselves. And I feel like the axe is always just about 1 foot over their neck. So things like the creepy little girl death god that may be responsible for this whole reincarnation thing, maybe as some sort of celestial justice, giving them a chance to find the real killer. Maybe, all of this stuff. I don't know, I'm cautious. That's kind of stupid. I don't think you need to do that, man. And then, like, you find out that the real father is, like, the psychopathic serial killer. He's just actively going around killing people. Very, very cautious. Could be good. Could be good. Could be really stupid. But they earned some goodwill here. They really did. They resisted the urge to make someone try to kill themselves. They seem to have gotten some better instincts. There's a lot of stuff I really enjoyed, and the adaptation really started cooking. The production was genuinely next level. So I'll keep going. I'm in it for the long haul now. We'll keep talking about it as it airs. See you in season 3. Here's a little shot of Melt's awesome internal psychedelic self-actualization sequence, which I could watch a million times and not get tired of. I'll give this an 8.5. Yeah. The last show we're going to talk about before we wrap things up is Shikanoko Nokonoko Koshitantan. Yeah, I watched this. I watched the Brain Rot Deer show. I had the OP Shikanoko Nokonoko Koshitantan. Shikanoko Nokonoko Koshitantan. Stuck in my head, and the ED, which bum 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 bum. I think it's like a kid's song, and they show how you make deer crackers. I love it. And then this was the most stuck in my head when almost every episode has it, where they have like a strange sequence, usually where something really terrible happened, and they go, Shika, Shika, Shika. That's been playing in my head for weeks now. Yeah. I did all that. We really had a moment there when this first started airing. Everybody was going crazy about the deer. But it was just that. It was just a moment. Could we have somehow sustained this into a true deer season? Probably not. You know, kind of everything that could have been done with it was done with it within like 2 weeks. But at the same time, it really can't be understated how poorly the Western anime industry is prepared to capitalize and support something like this. It's actually like comically bad how bad the ball got fumbled with Shikanoko. Everybody was going deer crazy. Everybody loved Nokotan. Everybody wanted Nokotan anything. They could have rushed out some merch. They could have had a plush. They could have done memes. They could have tweeted about it. They could have done really anything. They could have had less garbage translations for the official subs. They got handed like the most viral marketing potential thing ever. You know, there was already people that loved the manga. They were getting all pumped up about the manga. People in Japan loved it. It was going crazy. And it became this like 3-day huge Twitter phenomenon. And then they just were like, oh, you guys like the deer show, huh? Maybe you should watch Tower of God. Like, I don't know the specifics. I don't know what company licensed this. I don't know what lab it came from. But, like, it's really funny to me that we live in an era where if a company goes, like, slightly viral, like, it's a blessing, really, that this didn't happen. But normally we see stuff run into the fucking ground. And our dear friend Nokotan got to skate by completely untainted because they didn't know how to handle it. Alright, but what's the deal with this show? Why were people hyped up? Why did some people watch the whole thing like me? So it's a pretty typical, like, cute girls doing cute things, slice of life show. You got 4 wacky girls. They're in Deer Club. They sit around. Not a whole lot happens. We've seen shows like this before. But this time, we have a deer. One of our girls, Nokotan, is a deer. She does, like, weird deer stuff. This is funny. Most of the other jokes, like, were okay. I think they're pretty standard. The idea of, like, a former delinquent that wants to be a model student. That's, okay, that's funny. She has, like, an obsessive little sister. Okay. She's got, like, a rival that's also obsessed with her. Okay. I don't even remember some of the other ones, but all just kind of like your standard boilerplate stuff. I think the other joke that I really liked, though, is the weird farmer girl that's obsessed with growing rice paddies. She was good. The weirder it was, the funnier it was. But the deer stuff, though, that was good. I like the deer stuff. I like how much they treat her like a deer. I like when someone comes to Deer Club And they say, well, this is our deer. We take care of the deer here. And she's like, yeah, we have to brush the deer. And then she's just like brushing Nokotan's hair. I don't know, that's like really funny to me. And then she does like other stuff that has nothing to do with being a deer. She has all sorts of like wacky powers that she can like take her antlers off and there's like a banana inside, or just take her head off and there's various things inside. And she has all sorts of strange powers that have nothing to do with being a deer. It's pretty funny. And I like that Koshitantan suffered so much because she couldn't uncomprehend it. That almost every joke is just her like not being able to understand exactly what Nokotan is, what like trying to like understand her based on being a deer or being a human, and neither of those things sufficing. It's good. It reinforces the fact that it is funny that Nokotan is a deer. So I called it a brain rot show. What is brain rot really, and is this show brain rot? The only really good answer, definitely the best answer, is that trying to define brain rot is stupid. But that's not how we roll on this channel. Now, you might be looking at the running time and being like, oh, whew, she's not gonna talk about this for very long. And it's true, and I could talk about brain rot a lot longer. But I think brain rot takes many forms and many mediums. I've been exposed to a lot of like brain rot short form video content via like mostly TikTok reposts on Twitter or people uploading YouTube shorts or whatever. There's certainly a type of brain rot Twitter post as well. I think there's brain rot video games. But we can just kind of try to talk about how Nokotan is like an example of brain rot. So I think brain rot in some ways can be tied back to the idea of the high effort shitpost. And this is a term that doesn't get thrown around too much because it sounds very negative. But you can apply it to something like Nichijou or Bocchi the Rock, where basically it's like the juxtaposition between what is like a normal scene. So, you know, Nichijou, famous example of when she forgets her homework. Yuko forgets her homework and the teacher hits her with the notebook. And they replay it like 18 times in increasingly insanely high effort Sakuga. Insane effects, everything. And she goes, God is dead! It elevates a typically normal scene to the absurd. So you get to that what am I watching level type of insane experimental Sakuga. Bocchi as well, you know, a million instances of Bocchi having a typical moment where she feels anxious and she shuts down, but it's depicted in a million different ways, like her suddenly turning into a low polygon model that's thrown into a destructible environment, or when she envisions herself becoming a gigantic kaiju in a real pitch perfect Godzilla parody. Basically like busting into a totally unnecessarily over the top level of experimental Sakuga that you would expect to see in like totally cinematic climaxes of the actual emotional apex of the project, but is just sort of tossed in there. The juxtaposition makes it funny. There's this feeling of a blunt unreality, of emotional whiplash, because your entire expectation of how the scene is going has now been tossed right off the tracks. So brain rot zooms right into this idea of like kind of juxtapositional comedy, where what you were like expected to see and how the sequences seem to be flowing is like derailed very kind of like hostilely. But brain rot is sort of like stripping away any other like appeal that the scene could have and focusing entirely on the sense of like you're watching something and you're not really sure why. Like, why is this happening? There's no real contrasting emotional moments to the brain rot. Like Bocchi the Rock and Bocchi the Rock and Nichijou both have very strong, emotionally cathartic scenes, very endearing characters, true emotional climaxes. Nokotan, not so much. The brain rot just keeps piling up. There's no kind of other modes for a scene to happen in. It's just sort of normalcy or the illusion of normalcy, and then it devolves into brain rot. Suffering and helplessness is the main emotional mode. Any sort of like cathartic moment of triumph or whatever is very quickly undercut. The emphasis is on pointlessness. The more I talk about this, it's just Family Guy. Family Guy is a brain rot show for sure. There's constant fourth wall breaking for really no reason at all. Often not as like the punchline or a setup or a joke or anything like that, but just kind of like a reminder to really detach you and make you kind of just stare at it and go like, what am I watching? And the high effort Sakuga isn't really there either. Like there's kind of a similar function where the art style like breaks and suddenly it's not at all what you predicted. But they're all very low effort shitpost. Often the low effortness is the shitpost in and of itself, that suddenly there's just a very low effort gag like thrown at you. Many such cases of this, I don't know, it's stuff like suddenly Nokotan is drawn as like a Fist of the North Star character or whatever. Like that's not really a high effort shitpost. Like it catches you off guard and it's funny, but it's not like there's much to it. She just like looks like that for some reason to be the punchline of a joke where she's doing something like weird and bombastic. The ultimate effect, it's not just that it's like funny or confusing. There's another thing. There's like a third sense that gets activated where the joke is sort of on you, but you're kind of also in on the joke, and now the joke is just sort of on the fact that they actually put this on TV and that other people are watching it and going, what the hell am I watching? Just sort of this general feeling of like, why did they make this? What am I watching? And that is our dear friend Brain Rot, at least in this context. So yeah, good show. I had a good time. We'll give it a 7.5. I had fun. Okay, that's it for this season. I'm so glad to finally get this done. Next season we're gonna have a lot of shows to talk about. It's definitely a heater. Next season is very, very strong so far, and I still gotta watch Monogatari too. So if you like hearing me talk about anime, don't worry. You won't have to wait long, and there will be more anime to discuss. There's always more anime to discuss. Okay, bye bye.